morning, everyone. It's 11 now, so we are going to start the meeting. I hope the sound quality is okay for you. If not, please let me know through the chat box. So I'm Adrian Bodgerman. I'm a research manager here at CIRIA. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar to launch the Big Biodiversity Challenge in 2023. So before we begin, I would like to cover a few housekeeping slides. Here we go. Yeah. All right, today's webinar is being recorded. We will share the link with you afterwards. All attendees are in listen mode only. If you have any problems with your connection or audio, please send us a message in the chat box. There will be plenty of time for questions after the presentation. During the session, please type your questions into the Q&A box. Please state if you wish to direct your question to a particular speaker. I'm highlighting here the different sections, but we are all very familiar with that by now, I guess. We will monitor questions as they come in and cover as many as we can in the time available. We will also conduct some audience polls, more on that later. You can see on the bottom left side of the screen that we have a couple hashtags and social media keywords, so don't hesitate to use those. And we aim to finish around 12:45. So it is my pleasure to welcome you to this launch. And I just want to start by inviting you to take the Big Biodiversity Challenge today. If you head over to our website, the pages are now live, and you can download the entry forms and submit your projects. I will touch on that a little bit later, but we also have champions this year. So yeah, a bit more on that later. A little step back, I want to take this opportunity to maybe introduce a little bit more who we are. So the Construction Industry Research and Information Association, we are a not-for-profit member-based organization, and we just turned 60 years. Our core strength has always been improving performance through collaboration in the built environment and construction sector. We do this by delivering independent guidance, such as the SUD training and the SUDS manual, the ROC manual, Asbestos and Biodiversity Net Gain, and many others. We've also converted some of our guidance into training, and the most popular ones are the ones around SUDS, but we also do have trainings about working with wildlife and environmental good practices on construction sites. The third output of CIRIA are networking events. So we put on around 50 events per year. They are a mix of online and in person. And we have topic-specific conferences, annual debates, and lectures, and webinars dedicated to the guidance that we release. So we are a small but growing organization with around 80 members, and we strive to improve performance in our chosen team that you can see here on the screen. You can recognize some of them. But I would like to, first of all, highlight the members that we have here. You can see that we cover a large spectrum of the construction industry, from infrastructure clients like EA, Network Rail, National Highways, etc., Tier 1 contractors like BAM, Kier, Balfour Beatty, etc., consultants, WSP, Arup, Atkin, Arcadis, and more, suppliers, regulators, government departments, and academics from Northumbria, Reading, Cardiff, Aston, and Imperial. I did not list all of them, but we want to thank you for being members of CIRIA. Something that we are also managing here at CIRIA are communities of practice. And this webinar is brought to you, or let's say co-led by one of the community of practices that you can see on the screen here, which is the Biodiversity Interest Group. But I will speak a little bit more on that later. We have the Build of Site community of practice, and we also have SUSDrain, which is for sustainable drainage, everything SUS related. And you can see as well the Construction Innovation Alliance, etc., etc. All these are very dynamic groups where we explore specific theme and we share knowledge and experience. Our history, let's say, with Biodiversity Net Gain. Here you can see that we started with creating the Biodiversity Interest Group in 2013. That's why the BIG acronym stands for. And that same year, the Biodiversity Challenge started. And so we are really, really proud to be in the 10th year of the challenge, and that's what we are celebrating this year. The awards themselves started in 2014. More recently, we published a Biodiversity Net Gain Good Practice Principles and Guidance document. And we also have a couple more that are linked to biodiversity, like improving performance of linear assets through green infrastructure, and the Sustainability Champions, which had a case study specifically on biodiversity. The objectives of the biodiversity community of practice are really to grow support for improving biodiversity value in the building industry. We are also we are also trying to have biodiversity net gain principles in each and every project, but this is going to change because obviously biodiversity net gain will become mandatory at the end of the year. We want to improve collaboration and enhance knowledge transfer. We want to demonstrate sector leadership through guidance and resources, improve understanding of how biodiversity policies are being developed, and enable peer-to-peer discussion. It's all about getting together and learning from each other what works, what does not, what can be solved with the help of CIRIA. We have a series of outputs that we are going to organize throughout the year. So the community of practice is on a yearly basis, and we start by kicking off the challenge with today's webinar. Then we're going to have a follow-up webinar in April, which will be really about celebrating the 10th anniversary of the Biodiversity Challenge. We want to go back and look at the very first winning project, how they're doing today, what have they learned throughout this 10-year process, how this project evolved. We want to understand how the landscape has changed throughout those 10 years and how some of the barriers were overcome, but also identify new ones to come forward. Then we are going to, the community of practice will contribute to CIRIA Blue-Green Infrastructure Conference, which will be scheduled in April, May. This one will be focused on targets, blue and green targets, and the community of practice will have one item on this conference. We will then have a biodiversity community of practice led webinar, which will be combined with a site visit in June. And then we will have our flagship ceremony in September in London. So stay tuned for that. We will share more information as we get closer to the event. And lastly, at the end of the year, we will have a second Blue-Green Infrastructure Conference where the Biodiversity Cup will be involved. The benefits of joining this biodiversity community of practice are many. And I would say that visibility is one of them. It's at the bottom of the list, but it's actually quite important because we have our main website, which will evolve throughout the year, that display your organization. You'll have speaking opportunities, free access to all online events, up to 4 complimentary tickets for the award ceremony. You have the opportunity to join the judging panel for this year's award entries, which is always very exciting and a super fun process. You are de facto a sponsor of a community of practice event or a category of the awards. You will see when we talk about the actual categories that some of them still need to have a sponsor attached to them. And lastly, you will be participating in shaping and scoping future CIRIA activities on biodiversity. If you want to join the COP, just get in touch with me. I will put my email in the chat box in a minute, or you can head over to the website, which the URL will be displayed throughout this presentation. And with that, I want to thank our members, the 2023 Biodiversity Community of Practice members. So we have Arcadis, Balfour Beatty, BAM, EHM, Heathrow, Keir, National Highway, Trust Green, Vertical Meadow, and Wildflower Turf. Thank you so much. This is thanks to you that we can have such an event and that we are able to launch this biodiversity challenge and award this year. Let's take a look at today's program. It's quite packed, but we are really thrilled to start the day with an introduction on what is the challenge, a little bit of history there. And then we are going to hear from some of the winners from last year's award. So for that, I am thrilled to be joined by Dr. Martina Girvan. So Martina Girvan is Senior Technical Director and Head of Ecology and Arboriculture and Natural Capital Community of Practice at Arcadis. She will chair this meeting, this webinar, but not only that, but Martina is also our Biodiversity Community of Practice Chair. We have Alistair Law, founder of Vertical Meadow. We also have Josh Smith, Environmental Advisor at J. Murphy & Sons. Sarah Crush, Corporate Social Responsibility Manager from TechHam. Robert McTaggart, Technical Director from Stentech. And Chris Matters, Senior Contracts Manager from Barhale Duther. And with that, I would like to start today's webinar, and I am delighted to introduce our chair, Dr. Martina Girvan from Arcadis.
Thank you very much, Adrian. And it's a real pleasure to be here, and hopefully I'll give you a little bit of a rundown of why we're doing this, why we started, and sort of how we got here. So what is it? So back in the day, if you cast your mind back to 2013, you may be surprised to learn that a lot of people didn't actually really understand what biodiversity was. In fact, one of the most common answers to the question was, is it something to do with a washing powder? So we were working in an environment where really trying to get people to do something for biodiversity above compliance was quite a new thing. So we invited lots of contractors to sign up. We did a launch event saying what biodiversity does with us, for us and for our communities and for our lifestyle, and what can people do to just do one thing above compliance. Now, what the brilliant thing is since then, our compliance has actually shifted as well. But when we launched it, so it was quite a new thing, and we had amazing awards ceremony at Kew Gardens, which was really invigorating and enlivening and inspired an awful lot of excitement actually about what the construction industry could do. And in the photograph there's Louise Clark, who's now of Barclay Group, and Peter Johnson, who was of Keir Sustainability, and they were two of the founder members as well, who contributed such a lot to get this up and going. Real success in the first year, we had 118 entries. Over the years, we've had nearly, I think, 900 entries. we've had 70 awards winners, and that includes 88 overall awards winners. So now we're in its 10th year. We're really looking to sort of, again, grow and expand the audience as well as the awards. When we started, it was, and these are still very welcome additions, a lot of quite small artificial habitat enhancements. So lots of invertebrate houses, hard hat gardens and things like that, and great contributions from children as well in building these things. And we still welcome those kind of opportunities, but it really has grown and grown and grown. So we have quite substantial habitat creations now. The top right here is one from Maple Tree Investments, and that's a legacy winner, looking at not only creating the habitat, but what happens once you've created your habitat. How are you building upon that year after year, and keeping your sort of workforce and community involved in that. Bottom right, we've got Heathrow, who are a regular contributor. They have an amazing biodiversity habitat creation and management program, and that's some of the habitat there. On the middle slide here, we have an entry winner from Graham's, and that's waterfall ditches at Tilbury 2. And on the bottom left, it's another regular contributor here. It's art ecology. They're the vertiples. I think they were one of the original winners for innovation quite early on. And again, it's wonderful to see how they have evolved that vertical technology. And then on the top slide there, we've got a really interesting one from biomonitoring, which is around using bees as biodiversity and air quality indicators. So really, you know, interesting, exciting stuff that is being evolved from where we started. I'm just going to run down on some of the awards categories, sort of roughly what they mean, how you can get involved. So our client-led award is one that we are encouraging owner-operators who have land and are sort of thinking strategically about that land use to apply for. Now, a lot of people are working towards net zero using nature-based solutions for that. So we're really thinking about, you will be planning this already. You've probably got strategies towards hitting your soon to be mandatory biodiversity net gain. So we'd love to see applications from you. The community engagement one is probably our most popular award, actually. And that can be engaging with schools or other communities and knowledge sharing. And we've got some great a talk coming up on that, and one of our winners as well. The large habitat creation. That's one that is really something that after the construction is over is providing a really significant legacy. And we recognise, though, that every single positive impact really matters. Just as every negative impact to biodiversity is cumulative, so is every positive impact. So we do have a medium, and now we've reintroduced the small awards. And the small awards is going to be for something under 0.5 of a hectare. So we've got these different scales, recognizing that people are working in different kind of scales, from garden towns down to, you know, complexes of flats, down to maybe redeveloping, you know, a very small area indeed. So really looking forward to getting some of those small scale entries in this year. The Innovation Award is a really exciting one, and that can, you know, that can be for anything. So be as innovative as you like with the Innovation Awards. And we've had, for example, in the early days, there was Hedgehog Highways with one of the winners. And more recently, we've had people who were looking at actually removing trees using structures that were not going to damage trees around them, and rather than cutting huge swathes through woodland, for example. So yeah, be as innovative you like in that one. The Construction Phase Award is for sort of temporary enhancements. A lot of these construction projects are going on for a very long time. So a temporary enhancement could be a green wall around your construction site, or we have also had, for example, ponds and freshwater swimming ponds as well on some of our temporary construction sites. So again, there's a lot one can do while construction's going on, from, you know, a year to 10 years in some areas. The Legacy Award is looking at what happens next. So if you have something that you maybe did complete quite some time ago, but you can show how that management has actually continued to maintain and increase biodiversity, that could be, it could also be verges, it could be green estate management, or it can be like a long-term habitat creation management. We're also reintroducing our Biodiversity Champion Award, but in two different slots at the moment. So we've got early career professionals, which are for those who haven't been in the career for more than 5 years. And then we've gone for a more established professional. Now, anyone can nominate anyone for that Biodiversity Champion. You can nominate yourself, your company can nominate you, and that will also be judged by the judges. So that's really going to recognise those who their inspiration has driven a project. It doesn't need to be an ecologist. It can be someone within your team who has maybe recognised an opportunity, funded that opportunity, or managed that opportunity to fruition. So it doesn't have to be an environmental or ecological specialist. It can just be anyone who's demonstrated that their passion for doing something for biodiversity has resulted in significant outcomes. And I think the main message, though, from this sort of do one thing challenge is what you find is from little ideas, from really small interventions, really big things happen. People become inspired. One of the aims of the Biodiversity Challenge is to present these case studies, and that when someone gets an idea, that spreads. One of the judging criteria is around how your case study could be replicated, and are you sharing that knowledge so that a good idea from one team can be shared. And we really do want to just transform little by little how we engage with biodiversity and integrate it. So our overall winner will be again sponsored by Wildflower Turf, who's been with us from the beginning. And thank you very much to them. And also their prize is some of their wildflower turf, which has been very appreciated. And maybe we'll see this year how some of that wildflower turf has been used. And from the individual winners, we choose an overall winner, which really just best encompasses all of the aspirations of the awards. The closing date is the 12th of May. So if you are interested in applying, please do have a look at the website straight away. Equally, if you've got any questions, please do reach out to Adrian, and he will also probably reach out to some of the biodiversity community practice. If you need any extra advice or help in entering, please do let us know. So I think that's just again another reminder and a link through, because I guess you'll get these slides to take the challenge. So really looking forward to having some entries. Now I just want to introduce one of our previous construction phase award winners. So these are for those temporary enhancements that we're discussing. And I want to hand over to Alex Law. Alex is the founder of Vertical Meadow, and this is this new approach to having these temporary meadows on construction sites, these living walls. So I'm going to hand over to you, Alistair, to tell us about your case study.
Great. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Okay. So yes, thank you. Thanks everyone for joining today. And we're very excited to kind of talk about winning the construction phase biodiversity enhancement. And so it kind of started with Grosvenor, and when we won our first biodiversity awards with CIRIA in 2017 for a similar installation where we're growing wildflowers vertically. And if I move that, and that really kind of was us testing the concept of growing from seed in place and using native UK wildflowers. And I guess, I mean, talking about the award themselves, for us, really it was very important for us to kind of enter, because we feel that the kind of biodiversity during construction is often a very much an overlooked thing, and we feel that not only is it good for changing the perception of construction, but also, most importantly, it's about producing additional stepping stones, and it's kind of unused space, really, for us. And the project is with Grosvenor, and Grosvenor were redeveloping Holbein Gardens, which is very close to Sloane Square in central London. And as you can see here, this was some of the existing kind of greenery that was on the site, and I'll show you where our site was. And yeah, you can start to see the image. Actually, the project from Grosvenor's point of view has significantly increased the biodiversity on this site. And I think they've got 200% biodiversity net gain, which obviously in urban areas is easier. But again, for Grosvenor, improving biodiversity was top priority, which is why when we spoke to them about greening during construction, they felt this was very important because it was about this continuity. So you can see this bit of kind of greenery which they'll be putting back, very similar to what was there before. But obviously they're adding greenery both vertically and also on the roof. So it's quite an exciting thing to be sort of part of the continuity between what you saw on that Google Earth shot and kind of the final development, which is nearing completion. And I guess this is how we describe it. Typically, construction sites. Hopefully, it should go back. Yeah. So typically, construction sites. A delay. There's this kind of gap between pre and post, and this gap often, as you can see in the middle, is several years. And unless biodiversity is addressed during this, and obviously there is some help. Biodiversity Net Gain, but in urban sites where space is at a premium, it's often quite difficult to maintain what biodiversity was there, because as you'll see in a minute, on the site we worked on, that kind of that area of greenery pre-development was exactly where was space they were going to be using during the development for servicing the kind of the refurbishment. So we think there's got to be this kind of interim biodiversity, which is why the award is so important, really. And you'll go on to the next slide. And I guess the vertical meadow approach really is taking the lead from meadows that we have in nature. So for us, this is really about putting a nature that is functional back in rather than nature that is just pretty. And what I love about this image is the thistle in the middle, but you also see different stages of life through the meadow. So obviously the oxeye daisies are out blooming, but there are other species that have already flowered and other species that will be flowering. And this has been our approach. And we've worked very closely with Professor Nigel Dunnett, a wildflower expert, the Wildlife Trusts and Bug Life to make sure we're putting in the right sort of wildflowers to have the greatest biodiversity impact. And then moving on, and I guess what's unique about our approach is that we grow from seed on site. So you'll see some of the photos I'm going to show you of the project, but our approach always has been to avoid unnecessary transport of plants and all the embodied carbon associated with off-site growing. And then build off existing construction techniques, so it's typically just an easy add-on for construction sites. And then, as you can imagine, all our watering systems now, we recirculate water to ensure that we minimize water use, but we're also kind of managing it through connected irrigation systems. And it's quite important for us because only by kind of tackling this as a whole can we really expect kind of adoption to grow. And our system is very light. It can be stapled to scaffolding, hung off scaffolding or stapled to hoarding. We've really looked at embodied carbon of the materials. So our mat we've made is mainly either from recycled clothes, that's the substrate, and also natural materials which biodegrade during the growing process. So and help feed the wall itself. As we said, we recirculate our water and kind of we actually get the site teams really engaged in the installation and management process, which sort of I'll talk about a bit later on. It is quite important to get people invested in what we're doing and biodiversity. And the wildlife trusts we've worked with have assessed it and done and looked at one of the walls and assessed the sorts of biodiversity that appears on a wall based on what they've spotted, but also the species they've seen. And this is the start of the process of the project. We delivered our living wall by bicycle, so all the components arrived at our workshop in North London, and then getting them to site was for us part of this journey. And the idea that if we can use zero carbon methods of transport, we always do. And so this is all the wall elements for the project at Holbein Gardens. So one bicycle, although a very big bicycle, managed to transport these mats that we produce, which are pre-seeded. And these were then, as you can see from the next image, hung from the scaffolding. And you can see that, so that bicycle carried 38 meters of mat, 1 meter high. And that kind of, how do you say, sort of a mat was then hung off the handrails of this hoarding. And I think, as I explained earlier on, the kind of greening that was removed here was necessary to be removed just to be able to build a gantry, to be able to get the materials in and out of the site. And I think this is where looking at these new ways of bringing biodiversity, either through systems like ours or others, which take into the fact of these constrained sites, is quite key. And that's where I guess verticality comes in very useful. So yeah, that kind of mat, after it arrived on bicycles, was then hung by the scaffold team and on the handrail of the project. And what for us was very exciting is then it starts like that after installation, and then after about 4 or 6 weeks, you already start to see the wildflowers sort of coming out. And this is obviously exciting for us, but also quite exciting for the site team, who were constantly asking about what's going on. Oh, I can see some greenery, and what are you growing, etc. It started a very interesting discussion about nature on site, which obviously on a typical very mineral construction site, it was very exciting to have that engagement with kind of the site staff as we were kind of coming and monitoring the wall. And then it goes from that after about sort of 4 to 6 weeks to this after sort of, it was 8 to 12 weeks. And what's also quite interesting, it was quite a long wall. And I mean, you can see some very bright bits here. And what we found was, as you would expect on a normal meadow, is that some areas the sunlight came through the buildings, which were opposite. And that meant those areas flowered first. So we had a very varying kind of species adaptation across the wall. We typically put in about 25 different wildflower seeds, and this long wall of 38 meters literally had different microclimates running along it, which meant different things were growing and flowering at different times. And this for us is quite an exciting kind of part of the walls, is that because we deliberately sow such a wide mix, different areas grow different things according to their kind of sun, wind, habitats. So, and then kind of, and you can see some lovely bladder campions that we're growing here, and some yarrow, and some of the kind of grass. But I think this is for us the kind of these microcosms, these environments that we're creating, which are very dense with different things, are kind of really what we see as very similar reproductions of what you see on calcareous meadows. And actually the person you can see below is Gabs, the person who managed the maintenance of the wall throughout. And that was really interesting to see how he engaged with the wall. And he was checking filters every so often, making sure, I mean, the water, everything is very automatic, but the kind of real excitement was the way that how the wall changed, and it made him feel also empowered, and we got lots of great feedback from that. And this is, I mean, for us, not only this is about the interest from the constructor scheme who said this was very important for the sites, but also it was very exciting. As you can see the poppies, you can see the diversity and the kind of flourishing, but also, I mean, I always point to there's a bar on the kind of right hand side at the top of our wall, and it was the muck route for taking the muck and all this kind of demolition materials, where they put a mat over our green wall and just kind of dumped everything that was coming out straight in. So I love this idea that the green wall was unaffected, really. You can't really see any damage at all of kind of this sheet that covered it as they were pouring stuff into the truck. So I think these challenges of bringing greening into construction sites, and everyone say they're quite complex. Actually, they're not, but you just need to test it and run with it. And I think that's, yeah, I mean, that's where we are. And as a business, I think for us, it was a very, you say, important thing to be given the award. I mean, having the great judges and kind of the preeminent people on biodiversity around the UK kind of judging our system and deeming it valuable and useful for construction, for us was kind of a great endorsement. And also it's a great motivation, because in the end, we're driven, our business is driven about enhancing biodiversity. So if we're not, it's not deemed as delivering that, then we're clearly not doing our what is necessary. So yeah, I'll probably hand over back to the team, but I really would recommend everyone kind of look at what they can do.
Thank you very much, Alistair. And I'm very impressed at that cyclist skills on balancing, I have to say. And it really does show the importance as well of taking photographs throughout the process. So that really brings it to life for people. Thank you very much, Alistair. And now I'm going to hand over. Oh, I just want to remind people to pop questions in the chat. We'll be taking questions at the end, but do put them in the chat while they're fresh in your memory. I know I've got a question already. But now I'd like to hand over to Josh Smiths, who's one of our winners for the Biodiversity Legacy Award. Now, Josh is an environmental advisor with Murphy & Sons. He's working in the transport sector. He's got 9 years experience in the construction industry. He works on CP6 structure portfolios and on civil asset management projects on the rail, and schemes range from earthworks and drainage, structural repairs, scour, protection and emergency work. So that's serious civils there. So if I hand over to you, Josh, to tell us about your case study and winner.
Hi, can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you, Josh.
That's brilliant, thank you. So yeah, I'm here to talk about the Goulburn Wetlands project. So the Goulburn Wetlands won the Biodiversity Legacy last year. The project initially commenced in 2015, and that was between J Murphy & Sons and Goulburn High. And the management and enhancement of the site has been ongoing for 8 years now. So a little bit of background about the project and probably how it came about. So J Murphy & Sons, they're a large multidisciplinary civil engineering company, and our transportation office is based within the town of Goulburn. So Goulburn's a small town northwest of England, between Wigan and Warrington, probably a population of around 25,000 people. And us operating quite a large business out of this town means you've got a lot of machine movements going through, flatbeds carrying plant, and then staff coming back and forth as well. And the town are quite accepting of us being here, and we wanted to give something back. So it initially started as a bit of a social value project, initially looking at increasing accessibility to green space for the residents. But during this time, we put feelers out to the community, and we were approached by Goulburn High School, so the local high school, and they were looking to undertake a green project of their own. And it just presented a really good opportunity for us both to work together. We had the resources to pump something back into the community, and they had the ideal canvas for us to do so. So we worked together with the school's students and then our own graduate workforce out of J Murphy & Sons. And the initial aim from the project was we wanted to provide a unique learning aid for the school, for something that would promote biodiversity awareness and also increase that green space as well. We wanted to increase the connectivity for native wildlife. So Wigan's one of the greenest boroughs in the UK, and there is a lot of wetland throughout the borough. So kind of drove the idea of maybe we could create a wetland of our own. And also with us being within the grounds of the school, we could provide an enclosed habitat. So it's not too accessible to the public. You can see it through the fence, but with it just being in the school, not just anyone can walk in. So it was a good enclosed habitat where we hoped we could bring some protected species in. So the initial wetland creation. So to start with JMS, we donated operatives, plant support staff. So this is everything from the operatives driving the machine, project managers, site managers, and then basically everybody just worked, kind of volunteered their time with the students to put the plan together for this. So the initial construction was probably around £60,000, which we donated into this project. This involved full removal of the hockey pitch. So the site where the wetland is currently, it was an old disused hockey pitch with kind of no biodiversity value at all and no value to the school really. It was in a state of disrepair. So they allowed us to rip this up and put something new in for them. So full removal of the astroturf pitch and then laid the foundations and a creation of basically 4 main ponds and then like ditches and scrapes kind of interconnecting them all. And then the horizons from what we dug out, we used to build a bund around the site of the wetland. So we appreciate that wetlands can, flood seasonally, and we hoped that, this would do so. But the last thing we want was, the students getting flooded out of the classrooms because we put a nice new wetland in for them. So we created the bund around the outside using all the horizons from the wetland. Habitat creation. At first, this was quite minimal because we wanted it to colonize naturally. As I said, there are wetlands nearby, the Wigan flashes, for instance. But we did put a few species in there just to set the ball rolling, really. So various rushes, bulrush, hard rush, for instance, within the ponds. We had trees donated, like alder, we planted around the outside, a little bit of hedgerow and a little bit of wildflower planting. And then artificial habitat creation as well. So there was materials donated and volunteered from the students, as well as materials from our own projects as well at J. Murphy and Sons. And we use this to create some artificial habitats like bug hotels, for instance, around the edge of the wetlands. And then we knew there's a lot of housing estates kind of popped up around Goulburn, and you can see from their applications that there are great crested newt licenses. So we knew there's GCN in the area. So within that artificial habitat creation, we created a lot of hibernaculum as well, kind of placed that around the outskirts of the wetland, just in the hope that those GCN would start finding the way to the site. And then also the development of a habitat management plan. So that was the initial creation. As I mentioned, that was 8 years ago now. In the space in between, we've installed a bird hide onto the site of the wetlands just to be used as a classroom. So the wetlands is used as an outdoor classroom, but the weather in the northwest of England isn't always the best. So we wanted a place where the students could learn indoors, but still be out on the wetland. Management of the pond water levels. So initially, these did fluctuate quite a lot. So we just called in favours from our supply chain, had them keep topping the water levels up, just keeping that consistent. And then planting days with the students. Initially, a lot of this was community driven. So we had like the Goulburn residents come out, various councillors, MPs, for instance, just come and do planting days and just try and gather a bit of awareness of what we created and spread the word a little bit. And then also, in the meantime, installation of walkways and bridges. So wetlands it was quite boggy when we first put this in. The walkways wasn't too accessible for the students. So we put in new paths and we created bridges as well. So it just enabled the students to access different pockets of that wetlands to be used as an outdoor learning space. And then also just gave the school a little bit of advice around grants and funding opportunities. The school are really keen and really proud of what they've got. But their first priority obviously is teaching the children. So we just help them as much as we can if we see opportunities for them to get a little bit more funding, like I said, through grants. We'll just provide them that information. So the benefits of the wetlands from both a social biodiversity perspective, from a social perspective, We've created an outdoor classroom, which we use for science and geography classes at the moment. The school runs an eco group, and this is led by Phil Taylor at school, who's really proud of what they've got. And he does a lot of work on the wetlands. So they volunteer their time, they go out, they do litter picks, planting, working with the Lancashire Wildlife Trust as well, who are involved with the project now. So sometimes they donate planting, and then the students from the eco group will go out, plant, and just help maintain that wetland as best they can. And then also Goulburn High played a really large part last year in a youth climate summit, which Wigan have started. So Wigan Borough Council have led this. And well, they put it together and they allowed the students to lead it. It basically just gives young people a voice in addressing the climate crisis and, you know, kind of alleviating their own climate anxiety, which is quite high in young people at the moment. And the students from Goulburn High got up on stage and yeah, they put a really good presentation together about what they've got and how the wetlands has developed, and they presented that in front of a very large audience, to be honest. So I wouldn't have been too comfortable getting up and talking, but they did fantastic. And then also the biodiversity benefits of the wetlands. So as I mentioned, Wigan's a very green borough with a lot of wetlands, but it's fragmented all throughout the borough. So what we've created is a pocket wetland, and it just allows species to move through that landscape a little bit better, because wetland is quite a rare habitat within the UK. And also I mentioned it's a fenced and protected habitat. So we did want to try and bring GCN into the wetland, and we've been eDNA testing the ponds, we've been doing ecology surveys, and we're really proud to confirm that, you know, GCN are using the site now. And it is just an enclosed area where that species can thrive and they're not being disturbed. The biodiversity increase for the site is huge. So the creation of reed beds, grassland, hedgerows, and all the tree planting which has gone in. As I mentioned before, the site was just a disused hockey pitch. Some of the arisings from the hockey pitch, which the Lancashire Wildlife Trust informed me last year. So a lot of the sand from the astroturf is kind of put to one side on one corner of the wetland. And now I don't know how they got there, but there are plants thriving within that corner, which are commonly found around sand dune ecosystems. And yeah, Lancashire Wildlife Trust were made up telling us we don't know how they got there, but nature finds a way, and we have a little sand dune ecosystem now in the back of the wetland. And then just creation of a natural carbon sink. So wetlands are fantastic at storing carbon, and the potential of this will just carry on increasing as, you know, as the site develops and matures. So the future of the wetland, as mentioned, this is an ongoing project, and it's something that Murphy's and Goulburn High are really keen to carry on working together with and keep developing this site. So there are further improvements planned for the site. This will be you know, various planting schemes with the students, and then just maintenance as well. So the site does need looking after, and we'll continue to do that with them. We do have further ecological surveys planned in, and these will be conducted over the coming years. So one of the parts that we really want to focus down on now is that grey-crested new population. So we'd just love to see how that population develops over the coming years, and hopefully how it thrives within our wetland. We continue to work with Goulburn High School. Typically we've done a lot of STEM events over the years, but being a civil engineering company, a lot of this generally focuses around engineering. But now we've got the wetland there in the school, it gives us something, you know, to talk around more around biodiversity. The environmental advisors from our team, we go into the school and we talk about, you know, environmental jobs within construction, and now we can talk about different levels of green engineering, and we can show the students that, you know, it's not just all excavators, cranes and concrete on site. You know, there are green options there, and for those students that are a little bit more environmentally minded, we can show them there's a career path, and there's, you know, there are options where they can come in and kind of make a difference. Goulburn High continuing to work with the Youth Climate Summit. So other schools will be visiting the site. This will include different walkouts of primary schools as well, which is really exciting to see. And then also further works and volunteer visits planned with the Lancashire Wildlife Trust. They're bringing volunteers out to site, again, just continuing to do planting, undertaking survey works, and basically just watching the site develop and helping us maintain it. I think that was my last slide. Yeah, so if there are any questions, just put them in the Q&A and we'll pick them up at the end. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Josh. That really is incredibly inspiring, and what an amazing resource for those children to have, and also to get children inspired by nature-based solutions and green engineering, because it's something at the moment we really have a shortage of environmental professionals. And I think a lot of that is because at schools they don't realise that that's a career. So I think really, really astonishing. Thank you, Josh. And I'm sure we'll have lots of questions at the end. So our next speaker, I'd like to introduce Sarah Crush. Sarah works for Fakenham, who are land promoters and contractors for house building, and Sarah leads their corporate social responsibility, and she's really driving community benefits through their social value strategy, and they were winners of our Community Engagement Award. So over to you, Sarah.
Thank you, Martina. It's lovely to be here today to talk to you all about the Community Engagement Award, particularly as the 2023 CIRIA Awards are launched. Hopefully we'll provide you all some inspiration for what you could submit for this year's awards as we talk through. As Martina said, I'm delighted to be here to talk to you about the Eddie and Ellie programme. There's been loads of great speakers this morning on biodiversity already, so we're obviously very pleased to be in that group. Our Eddie and Ellie programme is something a little bit different. It's less focused on physical planting and locations and more focused on education for the future generations. So Eddie and Ellie is a cross-curriculum package of activity that we run in primary schools around each and every one of our sites as an organisation. Fakenham are house builders and partnership developers working across the south. We have about sort of 1,500 plots that we produce every single year and growing each year, and a big land bank that we promote. And we recognise that there is a need to engage the next generations, not only in the very important topics of biodiversity and their local environment, but also in the construction industry to help support skills for the future and help children to understand that there is connection between the two things. So we have a children's book that is used as a springboard to do that, and we focus on the book, which is focused around Eddie and Ellie, who have a magical adventure moving into a new home, and they shrink down to the size of a hedgehog and have a good old romp around with a whole bunch of British wildlife as part of the story in the book. And we use that as the foundation to leap out into a number of different national curriculum areas to talk to lower key stage 2 children, so year 3s, the 7-8-year-olds, for those that are uninitiated to the year groups, about issues of ecology and nature within their local environment. It is a key part of our social value delivery programme, driving one of our key pillars around building future generations. And I think that's the really important thing, and the great thing about having won this award actually is that we won in our first year of operation with the programme. The programme's gone from strength to strength since then, in no small part because we were able to say that it was recognised by CIRIA as being a programme that has significant value to offer, and had achieved some great engagement in the local community, and we do continue to see that. So what is Eddie and Ellie all about? We wanted to deliver some sort of industry-leading insights for children in and around the developments that we work on. There was some very alarming press way back when now, back in 2019, but sadly, unfortunately, things haven't changed significantly, about children of primary school age not being able to recognise some of the basics of our local ecologies and systems. And 83% of kids can't recognise a bumblebee, they don't recognise oak leaves, they don't know what blue suits look like, which is just incredibly sad. Speaking as a parent myself, I think that my children's lives can only be enriched by the environment that they're in, and we wanted to try and address that. And as a developer working very locally, networked with communities and schools in and around our developments, we saw an opportunity for us to do that and to reach a range of stakeholder audiences with this programme. Obviously the children being at the forefront of that, but also by extension the teachers, parents, local councillors and influencer groups that would be working in the area at the same time as us. So the Eddie and Ellie programme follows the life cycle of a development once we get into the construction phase. So in the first instance, what we do is we go into school and we talk to children about what we found at site. All of you are obviously biodiversity professionals, so you know that we need to survey ahead of time before construction work starts to find out what's there in the first place. We share that with the kids and we introduce them to the Eddie and Ellie workshop in school through a workshop that's delivered by a teacher contractor that we work with, who's fully qualified and able to adapt to all of the different needs within that classroom and make it accessible to the children through a reading workshop. Every child receives a free copy of the book as part of the programme as well. 1 in 5 5 to 8-year-olds within the UK states they do not own a book, which is an astonishing statistic and one that is very relevant this week with World Book Day approaching. And we're proud to be able to hopefully start to address that in some of the more underprivileged areas that we work as a partnership builder in particular. We then move on to talk to them about the water cycle and about supporting wildlife in their own homes and gardens, along with some basic seed planting and bee hotel making with them that they can take home or they can use in school in their outdoor classroom areas. And that's something that I think that really helps because around months 4 to 7 on a development, we've essentially got a muddy field that we've scraped, and we need to still kind of inspire young minds that are walking past that site to understand that there is still nature there and there is still an important thing to be considering there. Obviously, whilst we're putting in drainage, there is a clear linkage and some early years careers learning for children on the water cycle that we deliver there at the same time. Once we get to superstructure works, about months 8 to 12, we bring the kids to site and we talk to them again about what we found, what we're doing, any visitors that we get to site from local wildlife, and we talk to them in a really accessible way, in a gamified way about the local wildlife that we're seeing in the area and what we hope to support moving forward with the development features that are coming forward. And that can be anything from talking to them about the bird and bat boxes that are being installed, swift bricks, pollinator landscaping, and also obviously some of that sort of tree protection and existing features that we're preserving as part of the site. Along with any blue infrastructure that's being put in. Often you'll find the SUDs get discussed at that point. So there's a real, I guess, really nice kind of connection between biodiversity and support for our environments, along with the realities of what construction is and looks like for those children, the visitors at site. Each and every school that we work with, regardless of the scale of the development, will also receive a fully funded trip to a Wildlife Trust day. So they receive an education day that is facilitated for us by the Wildlife Trust in Kent, in Sussex. And we are delighted to have worked with the Wildlife Trust on the development of this programme as well. So this wasn't something that we just came up with, went off, kind of wrote a fairly average piece and kind of ploughed out there to tick a box. This programme was a long time in development. We worked with the education specialists at West Sussex County Council. We worked with a number of parents and children in test pilots, and we worked with the Wildlife Trust, Surrey Wildlife Trust in particular, to help develop this programme and make it something that was really meaningful, engaging, and did do the job in terms of those young minds who are just making their way and beginning to learn about what it is to be centred in their local environment. Once we've done that, as the development comes to a close, sometime around that kind of 18 months, 2 years mark, is fairly average for our development sizes. We will bring them back to site to see the finished product, and we'll also support with ongoing legacy pieces, be that building hibernaculum, wildlife gardens, supporting their forest school at site, and also in the classroom. Where we're building schools, obviously that has an obvious choice, but even where the school is not directly located with the development, we will support that school in the development of their own land to make it accessible for the next years of children that are coming through once we are no longer working in the area. I think really the success of the programme is in the feedback from the young people that participate, and I think this is the moment probably to share some nice photos and some smiley faces with you and give you a flavour of some of the kind of types of activities that the kids get involved in. Everything from pond dipping to bug hunting to orienteering. We have the Making 3 R's posters, so reduce, reuse, recycle, that we then copy and laminate and put on our hoardings. So we have a display area for the schools on our hoardings, and we do encourage, if it's seasonally appropriate, for them to also get involved in planting. We've had runner beans growing up our hoardings in the past that have been planted by the schools, just to really kind of, I guess, give that early but satisfying outcome for the kids in terms of their work being visible and making a difference to them. In terms of the materials, there's some examples here that you can see kind of the style of the input, and I just wanted to, I guess, share, rather than me kind of sitting here saying, isn't it wonderful, some of the feedback that we've had from external parties, teachers, and wildlife trusts and councils that have been involved in the programme. I think it's brilliant to have resources that are engaging and interesting to the children, to enhance them. So many schools these days do not have the funding to deliver these enrichment activities, and that is where we see our opportunity, is to complement the curriculum learning that the kids are doing in school with these really kind of nice experiences and enriching activities that they will remember in their futures as they think about joining our industry. And as they think about how they themselves can influence their environment for the future. And probably one of my favourites is a slightly lengthy but wonderful piece of feedback that we received from the school we work with in Godalming, around that lasting and meaningful impact that this programme has. This school, despite being in Godalming, which has perception of being a very sort of affluent leafy Surrey, is in the 10% most deprived wards in the country, and these kids really don't have the budget to be doing school trips, to be doing activities with their children, with their parents rather. As children, they are in that group who don't own books quite often, so these experiences do give these children a real window into what their future could look like, and we're all about opening up that opportunity and inspiring them to get involved and to kind of get their participation up and their ownership and custodianship of their local environment increased. And as you can see, the head teacher there says these experiences have equipped our children with the knowledge needed to make informed choices about how they interact with their environments. And for us, there's no better accolade than to hear that from a professional who works day in, day out with these children, that we are having an impact and making a difference to them. So I just wanted to finish with a couple of statistics. These are from the submission that we made. So we did have 5 primary schools at the time. The programme has doubled in size since then. And in our first year of operation, we delivered over 4,000 contact hours with pupils, and we generate about £7,500 worth of social value for every school that we run the programme with, and that's spread across all of our developments. We run the programme at every development we have, regardless of tenure, so whether we are building under our private Bacon brand, or whether we are building with one of our housing association or council partners for affordable housing, we will operate this scheme at no cost to the client or to the schools. And I think it's something that that really has just, been so relevant to this cohort as they're engaging with the climate crisis. It gives them an accessible and localized point to kind of take control and get involved with their futures. I'm going to finish there. Please do add any questions to the Q&A section, and I'll come back at the end to help hopefully answer. And otherwise, I'm going to hand back to Martina to move on to the next speaker. Thank you for the time.
Thanks, Sarah. Again, really inspiring. And I think it is so important how biodiversity can be that entry into enrichment for all education bases, and that real health and well-being. And not everyone has an access to nature for the reasons you've discussed, Sarah. And that might be that once again, it's open to them. All of a sudden, anything you see in your back garden, just like Ellie, can be really, really exciting. So thank you for that. I'm now going to introduce two speakers. We've got Robert McTaggart and Chris Mathers, and they won our Innovation Award, and they were also our overall winners last year. Rob is a technical director at Stantec. He's got over 25 years experience. He's been delivering large capital works and driving those innovative wastewater infrastructure solutions. And really importantly, his goal is to collaborate with clients and knowledge share and develop these innovative measures, but also for that to be backed up with sound science and evidence, so that can provide confidence in these solutions so that they can be replicatable. And then we have Chris Mathers, and Chris has a senior contracts manager, and his background is in heavy civil engineering schemes, working on the highways, rail, tunnelling, marine and flood defence works. But as well as this heavy civils background, he's also got a background in mechanical and electrical installations. He's been working on these kind of solutions since AMP3, but now he's actually delivering multiple schemes for AMP7, and that includes strategic planning and delivery of these new AMP7 frameworks with Barhale and Pure. So I'm really delighted to hand over to Rob and Chris for their case study. Thank you.
Thank you, Martina. Okay. Just see if the technology works now, and see if I can just go on to the next. So first of all, I've got an audience poll. So if you can have a look at those two questions. So question number one, have you got any plans to implement NBS in the near future? If you could have a look at that, and do you think there is sufficient evidence to replicate NBS like the one that I'm showing you now? So it's good to see that 50% want to embrace nature-based solutions in the near future. It seems to be very much a growing trend. If I was going to do this poll 5 years ago, it would be possibly less than 10%. So it's brilliant that there's thing, and it is really encouraging to see that most people believe that there is now sufficient evidence to replicate the kind of solutions. Okay, there's 40% of you that says that they're still to be convinced, and hopefully, sessions like this will help improve the evidence base. And that was one of the real undertakings of this project, was to look at it post implementation to determine how it worked and to provide feedback to the industry. So if I just go on. So when we talk about nature-based solutions, certainly within wastewater treatment and catchments, they tend to fall into two kind of categories. There are the constructed wetlands, which is Clifton would be one of those, and then there's kind of the more natural restoration of existing habitat, and even within constructed wetlands, you can get ones which are very natural, ones like Clifton, and you can get ones which are quite engineered in terms of the introduction of air and and the like to improve performance in terms of the water quality coming out of it. But with regard to nature-based solutions, one of the, as engineers, we're very, very good at solving solutions, but what we tend to do is sit in the what does the environment need and what's the cheapest solution. So we're always looking for the minimum kind of viable kind of solution. So we're in very much the environmental economic sort of part of the Venn diagram. But the biodiversity net gain, actually doing something for society and everything, brings us much more into this space of being sustainable. And I think biodiversity net gain is that pathway to being much more sustainable and moving more to a, you know, potentially a circular economy, which I think we need to step away from the kind of linear economy that we're at the moment. So being able to do that, and Clifton is perhaps one of those projects along that journey. If I just go down, so if we build on the kinds of wetlands that we look at, there are the engineered constructed wetlands. These are we used to call them reed beds. We don't tend to use reeds so much now with rushes and such, but you can see that they have a subsurface, there's media, they're actually looking to do use much more of a depth of within the actual footprint, and as a result of that you get a smaller actual arrangement. The integrated constructed wetlands, these free water surface wetlands, they're bigger, but they have certain advantages, and you know, we can see that with the results from Clifton sort of thing. So if I just go down more further. So one of the things that we use in terms of integrated constructed wetlands, these free water surface wetlands, is the PKC model. And I would encourage everybody to use the PKC model in the development. You can see the kind of parameters that you use within the equation. Once you know what flow rate you have and the inlet concentration, you can derive you know, performance from the formula to show what performance is coming out. And by and large, we see that using this equation is sufficient for the actual designs that we're putting in. So just to kind of recap on what Clifton, which was an integrated constructor, it's about 3,000 square meters, so around about 0.3 of a hectare. We used around about 24,000 plants, but it does all of the treatment and nutrient removal for a population of a small village of 180 people. And in terms of carbon savings, the results are very, very impressive. We're talking about 50% saving in capex. You know, we didn't have a pond line there. There was hardly any grey infrastructure put into this. Just really the control structures between the individual ponds. The operational saving is really, really significant, 79%. And there are no chemicals. There is virtually no power used on site. This is as passive as you can potentially get, and as a result, the biodiversity net gain for this site is 2.28. It is the first nature-based solution for full secondary treatment and nutrient removal in the UK. It's most probably one of the most heavily monitored treatment works in the UK, and I'll come on to show you some of the results from our findings, because it's been installed and running for about a year now, And also it was the first in the UK to have something called an operating techniques agreement, which is a side agreement alongside a permit to discharge. And what it does is allow a little bit less risk to fall onto the water companies in terms of having a concentration target rather than a permit condition limit, and it allows nature-based solutions. And certainly I would applaud the regulator in offering the industry these operating techniques agreements. They have been very, very useful in promoting these kinds of schemes. So if I just go on to the next one. Chris, would you like to take over?
Yeah, thank you, Rob. Yeah, so I'll take you through, I suppose, the construction side of things. I'd love to tell you it was really eventful, but actually the construction side of things was really quite uneventful from a civil engineering point of view, thankfully. All the excitement was really, I suppose, in the early stages of planning and then actually seeing how the schemes developed and performed. We got involved very early stage, which enabled an awful lot of planning to go into the site before we actually broke ground as such. We were able to carry out topo surveys, trial holes, and determine how much material was actually going to be surplus to requirement once we got down to the clear layer, which was there on the site. There was something in the region of around 2,500 cube of soft topsoil material, which needed clearing to allow us to be able to create or optimize the cut fill volumes within the clear layer that sat below. That initial early engagement was really critical because it gave us the time to be able to make sure that we had the clear regulations met, we had the materials management plans in place, we had the plan to be able to set up the habitat area adjacent to the treatment side of things, and it meant that we weren't going to take any material off site at all, which was just, it was a huge benefit to the scheme. As we moved forward through the construction period, we started on site beginning of May and then moved through, I suppose, the cut fill exercise very early on, and then through to water testing of the structures, and then moved into planting. And again, the planting we completed by the end of October, by the beginning of October was all planted and floors were turned. Again, that early engagement piece was critical to this, because the first order that we actually placed prior to Byhale MPO being in contract was actually for the plants themselves. We engaged with various suppliers, and Salax provided us with lots of advice around which plants, how fast they could be grown, to make sure that we didn't actually have to come off site once we'd created the wetland itself. So we had, as I say, the construction element was very uneventful, fortunately, and that engagement through that piece was critical. We also had, I suppose, because of the excitement that we'd had around what we were going to achieve and how we were going to do it, we had a significant number of visitors as the site progressed and things went through. We engaged with other water companies and other construction companies through the process with various visits on site. And my, I suppose, biggest concern of all the construction activities, which sounds daft, was actually managing people's expectations when you go from a very brown clay site to what it is very rapidly becoming. Rob, if you roll on to the next slide there, that was taken probably 6 to 8 months after we'd finished the planting, and the performance was exceptional by that point. So it really has developed very rapidly from being a brown site to a very biodiverse area. I'll hand you back to Rob for the performance. It's probably the important bit.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, so here's so Clifton has now been operational for more than a year, and as I said earlier in the talk, it is one of the most heavily sampled and site in possibly the UK. Every single pond is sampled separately. This is all part of the regulatory agreement, this operating techniques agreement. And what we see is that the concentration target that we're aiming for is 4 milligrams per litre phosphorus, and we're achieving around about 2. And that this is all data from day one. So you know the ponds themselves with being no plant growth to now achieving really good plant growth. And one value to actually point out is the after cell 4 and 5, the discharge to the environment. You can see there was one green value which was taken in August, and the phosphorus levels were undetectable. Now, there isn't another kind of wastewater process that could deliver that kind of level of performance. So it is actually doing its job particularly well in terms of performance. And the good thing about the performance of a nature-based solution is the very time when you've got potential eutrophic conditions within the receiving waters. That is the very time when you're going to get maximum performance out of the actual treatment process, sort of thing. So we're really pleased with the level of performance. I said that there's no power used in the process. There is no chemical used in the process. This is just simple nature and plants and water and soil that is being used. And to get sort of that 80% is phenomenal performance, sort of thing. So again, just going back to the design principles that we started off with, we followed the PKC model, which was developed by Cadlick and Wallace. You can Google it and everything. But within the Cadlick paper 2016, he looked at seasonal variation in the K value, and this is a surrogate for performance. And you can see here that even though the Cadlick one was developed in the States, we see our performance replicating that within the UK, sort of thing. So we designed using this technique, and what we see with the performance of the works is it's absolutely performing as in accordance with his literature, sort of thing. So if I just go on, so one of the so we've talked about Clifton. It's a full secondary treatment process. It treats all flows from the village, and there is quite a lot of flow variation. But at the same time, you're quite a big sized nature-based solution in order to achieve that that sort of removal. But what we can do is we can use it in conjunction with much more conventional treatment process. So one of the big items that is part of AMP8 will be storm overflows, and what nature-based solutions potentially could offer is that mechanism by which we can treat flows. The more we try and intensify processes, the more control we need over them. Nature-based solutions can take more variable flows, etc. So actually, there is possibly in combination using nature-based solution and much more kind of traditional solutions, and that would give us a very sort of happy medium for dealing with the challenges of AMP8, especially with around storm overflow discharges and the reduction of them. So that's the end of our talk, I think. If I just go down, yep. So I'd like to hand over to Tina.
Thanks, Rob and Chris. That is really impressive, and just so important that, you know, the knowledge that you're sharing on that monitoring to help other people to achieve the same thing. So I'm just going to hand back over to Adrian now, who's going to tell us a little bit more about how you can showcase your case studies for this year.
Thank you, Martina. All right. So as I mentioned in the introduction presentation, the challenge is now open, which means that you can today head over to our website, and in there you'll find everything you need to submit your entry. A couple dates for you to keep in mind. The deadline for submitting your entries is the 12th of May. So, you know, it gives you a little bit of time, but just a word of advice and caution, you know, this can take a little bit of time. So if you want to start early, that's always better. In June, we will be announcing the shortlists, and in September, the winners will be announced during our flagship ceremony. So it will be around the mid-September. We will follow up with more details once we. Who can apply? Organization and individuals, and you can submit several entries. There are a couple conditions though. So the interventions must be completed within 2 years of the application deadline, so up to and including the 12th of May. And each scheme can be submitted for up to 2 different award categories. We're asking you to submit 1 entry form per scheme per category. And unfortunately, we cannot accept previously shortlisted and award-winning submissions, just for the sake of variety, let's say. The website URL is on screen, bigchallenge.info. On this URL, you will find a lot of useful information. The dates that I just mentioned, the criteria and conditions for applying are in there as well. And so you can choose which category you wanna apply to, and you'll see that all the categories are described on the website. As mentioned before, we are thrilled to bring back the Biodiversity Championships. And we have 2 different categories for the champions. We have the early career professional, which is under 5 years of working on biodiversity related projects, and over 5 years, which is the established professional award. Once you've chose, so first you choose your award, if it's a project or a champion, and then you download the appropriate forms. You can just complete those and send it back to you to the big awards at ciria.org. This is your one email address for everything big related. So you can ask questions, you can ask clarifications. Yeah, so as I mentioned, one email address, one website, everything should be in there. If you have any doubts, if you want some clarification, don't hesitate to reach out through email. And that's it. So I want to wish you good luck for your schemes and projects. And we will, we'll be looking forward to receiving your entries and to be in touch later on if you're the lucky winners. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Adrian. And it's really easy to apply this one. It's not challenging to apply. So get working on it, get cracking now. I'd like to ask the speakers to just turn on their cameras and unmute themselves, please, because we've got a round of questions and answers now. We've got lots of questions in the chat. So if it's okay, I'm going to open the questions to Alistair, first of all. And we've got a question around how much it costs to install and maintain. And that's like also thinking around sort of drain cloggage and things like that. How was that managed? And those questions are from, I should say, Renuka and Daniela.
Okay, that's great. So the costs are for a metre squared of mat is about £100, and then we have the irrigation system. We don't install it. Normally we provide a kind of, I say, an IKEA manual, but anyone can install it. It's literally just plug and play systems. So the costs are related to scale, because the irrigation system is about sort of a £3 to £4 grand investment. So doing very long walls, the total installed cost might be about £150. Whereas if you're doing very short walls, it changes. But the mat itself is about £100 a square metre.
And I guess if you've got contractors on site, they can just pop it up for you while they're doing other things. And in terms of the maintenance, was there a problem with leaf drop and things like that?
No, I mean, we do kind of ask them, there's filters in there, so we ask them to the site team to clean filters, but we provide a explanation to the guys on site, and it doesn't need any expertise. They just open up a filter, check whether the mesh is clogged or not, and screw it back up. So we typically train the kind of site staff to do all that, and we haven't really had any problems with clogging or anything like that. They do, I mean, naturally they go along and remove leaves when they kind of see it building up, but what we've found is that it typically fits in with the people. I mean, it's often the gate staff, etc., who look after it, and it just fits in their daily duties without kind of, it's probably another 5 minutes a day or something like that, 5 to 10 minutes a day. So probably, yeah, even less than that. And we provide an app. We provide an app, which is kind of like a yes/no questions.
For maintenance. And we've also had a few questions about what happens afterwards and whether they can be reused.
So all the irrigation kit and all the pipes and stuff can be. The mat itself, because there's kind of roots in it, it's a mainly recycled mat, but unfortunately we are working on biodegradable versions, but we remove all the pipes and we reuse all of that, and then the mat itself has to be disposed of. But we are working on a biodegradable version, and actually it can be reused on other projects. So we've got lots of projects who want to move it from one project to the next. So that's something we've never done, but we've planned for it. It's always been about other site availability, just being ready to receive it. So, but yeah, we kind of, all the kind of significant carbon intensive items we reuse.
Okay, thank you, Alistair. I've got a question for Josh, actually. We've got a question around whether, sort of from a health and safety aspect, well, a few questions from a health and safety aspect on the wetland, you know, where people are worried about sort of children falling in when they were engaging with the wetland. And also, you know, on your maintenance of water flows, for example, are they stable now, your water flows, or do you have to keep topping them up? So 2 questions there around health and safety and perception of health and safety around water, and one was on the kind of the actual water flows. That's for Josh.
Yeah, no problem. So in regards to like objections from parents, teachers, etc., we didn't have any during the construction and, you know, the ongoing maintenance. The wetland is fully enclosed. It's fenced off, palisade all the way around. There's a gate on, so the students only access when they're accompanied by a teacher, for instance. In regards to safety measures that they put in place, I'm assuming it'd be risk assessment signed off. I can get the answers for that for you from the school themselves, and I can provide that across to Renuka afterwards if you want to pass me your details afterwards. I can get that answered, but that is one for the kind of school to address. And in regards to the water flows, so no, they were fluctuating quite a lot at the start, and you know, we did make mistakes during the initial construction. We found a lot of old farmers' drains when we went to go back, and when we went back and surveyed it. So we got them capped off, and then we installed like a puddle clay lining on the ponds, and that's just maintained the levels now, so they are steady. So hope that answers it for you.
Yeah, that's great, Josh. And in terms of sort of monitoring, in terms are they doing biodiversity monitoring on the site as well? Are they looking at what flora come in when, or what birds you might see and things like that?
Yeah, so we have the Lancashire Wildlife Trust come in quite frequently. So they do their own surveys, and then the students do their own as well. So within the bird hide that we installed, there's like species posters up on the wall, for instance, and then as they discover species on the wetlands, we just kind of tick them off the list, and we try and get the students to do that as much as possible. And we kind of keep the work with the Lancashire Wildlife Trust a little bit separate, just so the students have their own involvement with it. Because obviously, pillar to post, it's their 5 years throughout the school. So we think it's important that they're kind of having an influence on the project, and if it's them ticking things off themselves, it's something for them to be proud of a little bit more than.
Yeah, it's a really great opportunity to sort of learn as they develop as well. And then we've got some questions for Sarah, and this again harking back to sort of children sort of learning. Are there any sort of demonstrable effects on the rest of the community, you know, like children maybe taking home things to their parents that their parents weren't aware of before? Wondering just whether that kind of overall social enrichment, is there any way to sort of measure that?
Yes, we don't measure it because we don't take children's contact details as part of the process. That would be very much against safeguarding policy to be monitoring children's activities. But we do hear very much anecdotally through the schools, and actually through pupil contacts. Often we get little mini eco warriors contacting us that have been on the programme to challenge us further and ask more questions about the builds. That they do take the message home, and that they do, pass to power is still very much a thing in the parents' world, and yeah, absolutely, children do take that message on. We have got other areas where we have broader projects going on, so we do support community gardening groups and wildlife gardening packs and so on for grown-ups at our developments, and yes, we link the content between the two there, and yes, we find that very much that dialogue opens between parents and children, and between teaching staff and children as they go on the days, particularly around the Wildlife Trust Day, because obviously that's a big event that parents get involved in, and are very much kind of keen to hear the details of from their children. So yeah, that it helps to support that wider conversation, definitely. Do we measure it in a quantifiable way? No, we don't. But yes, qualitatively, yes, is the short answer.
Great, thanks, Sarah. And I wonder whether there's any way to kind of join up as well with the older children, so like what Josh is doing and what you're doing, to sort of look at that potential career progression as like an environmental consultant. Is there anything that collaboratively that you could do to sort of help those that just go through the children's life in school? Yeah,
so excuse me, the leggies got me. I think the next stage on for us, the work that we do with secondary schools as an organisation is very much more careers focused. So yeah, we definitely value that kind of early interaction and engagement in a very much imaginative and creative way through the Eddie and Ellie programme with younger children. Once they are in secondary school, obviously the creativity doesn't stop, and we do engage them with all manner of different activities, but it does tend to be more careers learning focused. And yeah, we as an organisation are a cornerstone employer. I chair the Coast to Capital Cornerstone Employers Group. For anyone that's in our region, do come and join and get in touch, reach out to me on LinkedIn. And yeah, we're very much about kind of promoting those green jobs, which is actually not a phrase that we enjoy, because that every job within the construction industry is related to the green world, and I think that's something that as we move forward, particularly as the legislation around Biodiversity Net Gain comes into place, will become just really embedded in everyone's role, whether you're on-site monitoring, whether you're in the design and planning department, whether you are fitting those features, then it's it definitely is something that is no longer a niche environment, and therefore is core to any career conversation that you're having if you work in the construction industry.
Great, thank you very much, Sarah. We've got lots of questions for Rob and Chris as well, around things like if you have low concentrations of effluent, phosphate in your effluent, how effective it is, around worries around actual flooding, and are people concerned that the wetlands might flood and what effect that might have? And then I think we've had some on sort of the cost benefits. So if you could answer a few of those and just in general expand upon your case studies, that would be fantastic.
So certainly the wetlands themselves, we were very fortunate with the Clifton install. We weren't in any floodplain or anything, so it was very, very straightforward, and we had fantastic clay to work with as well. So as Chris highlighted, once we were down into that clay layer, you know, we really were very good. So we didn't need a pond liner or anything like that. The most even though there's no screen, no other kind of powered assistance for the wetland, there's no smell. I've been there in the middle of summer, and there's no smell, there's no odor. You know, it's just quietly getting on with doing its task. So you know, and from the photos, normally we put treatment works behind palisade fencing. You could see we essentially just put some stock proof fencing around it, but certainly we're very much wanted to engage with the village and everything, and we're really surprised at the level of, as Chris put it, you know, the amount of visitors we've had to this one site, sort of thing.
And your concentrations of phosphate were quite high going in. If you did have much lower concentrations of phosphate going in, do you think you would still find that non identifiable result, or do you not sure yet?
Yeah, I think we have faith now in using the PKC model, and the PKC model will just simply say whatever your concentration, this is the level of hydraulic loading that you have on the thing, and this is the actual performance that you will get as a result of it. So yeah, certainly we wouldn't, when you've got high concentrations, they perform better. So if you've got 12 coming in, you've got 2 going out, you've got 80% removal. But even if you had much lower concentrations coming in, you'd still expect to get 30 or 40% kind of removal. And certainly some of the next generations that we're looking to install will be actual in-river catchment-based solutions. So this is in this configuration of the South Wake, where your conventional treatment. So you start moving to the whole catchment kind of level of using all various kind of techniques, and nature-based solutions being a really equal partner to conventional treatment to actually solve some of the environmental issues that we have within our catchments.
Which is really exciting. I'll ask a last question because I know we need to wrap up soon, but it's so fascinating, all of your case studies. On the kind of maintenance side, a lot of the reason people don't want to put in nature-based solutions is because they're kind of frightened about maintenance or effectiveness. Are there any sort of reassurances around that element that you can give?
Well, certainly in terms of effectiveness, we believe that the configuration that we've come up with, and we've got a number of these sites now, and they're all performing as per the literature, certainly the Cadillac and Wallace. With regard to maintenance, again, Cadleck and Wallace have done a tremendous amount of work here, and they've studied wetlands for over 2 decades. And people talk about you need to rip them out after 5-7 years. That's not the experience that we see with Cadleck and Wallace. They've looked at them for over 20 years and they're still performing as well as they were originally. And so I think there might be some sludge that might need to be removed, but you know, the loading rates that we're using here are so low that, you know, we expect, you know, this is so different from a conventional treatment process. You have to almost step back from all of those questions that you'd ask of a grey solution and say, I have to think differently to go green.
Yeah. Well, you know what, that's a wonderful closing remark about thinking differently to go green. I'll just hand over to Adrian, who I think wants to sort of summarise today's points and probably do a last push for this year's awards. So I'll hand over to you, Adrian. Thank you so much to all the speakers.
Thank you, Martina, for chairing the meeting. All right, so I want to close the meeting by saying a big thank you to all our panel participants and all the presentation we've heard today, all the projects that we've heard about were highly recognized during last year's process in the judging process. And these are all very well deserved, incredible projects. And we cannot wait to not only see how this project would evolve throughout the years, but also to hear about and discover the new generation, let's say, for this year of biodiversity projects. So yeah, this is my last push for you to log into the website, well, access the website and download the form, take a look at the different categories that are out there, pick the ones that you're interested in and really showcase your biodiversity projects. The deadline is the 12th of May, 2023. It's not too far away. So if you want to start now, that's better for everybody, including us. So thank you so much for that. We will be in touch throughout the year, especially in June when we're going to be releasing the shortlist. But also, as I mentioned, the biodiversity community of practice will be creating webinars, site visits, and interesting talks that if you want to get involved with that, don't hesitate to letting me know. Here on the screen, you have the email address at the bottom left. Any questions, just drop me a line. And of course, the URL for the website, bigchallenge.info. With that, I want to wish you all good luck. And thank you so much for coming to this webinar today. And yeah, we'll be in touch later. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Adrian. Thanks, everyone.